Hey there, I'm Evan Borsier, and you're watching vlog number 2, which is all about budgets and dealing with money as you get into bigger productions. So one of the first things that I ran into when I got into video production was getting paid, and that was initially a really weird concept. I remember one of the first videos I did was actually for a friend's kid's birthday party. And they paid me $50, and I was like, $50 for an hour of work or whatever it was seemed like really good money. So I was like, if I can keep this up, this beats a lot of other jobs. But then as I went on, you learn that production costs money, gear costs money, and you learned about actual budgets and what it takes to make something really good. So now I don't really work on $50 projects anymore, thankfully. And that's something that I get asked about all the time. I wanted to kind of talk about that today and talk about how you move up the scale to get the resources you need to do the projects that you want to. So I think a lot of people in the Facebook group and who are watching this are probably in the low couple $1,000 per video budget range. So you have $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 maybe. And you want to jump up to $8,000, $10,000, plus per project. So the first question that I would have is, what are you going to do when you get that kind of budget? Again, what does that mean for you? Does that mean that you want to make the same thing and just get paid more? Or are you going to give people a reason that you need more money? Because at the end of the day, a client isn't going to just necessarily randomly hand you an extra $8,000 to make the same thing, because why would they do that? Unfortunately, when it comes to budgets, in my experience, the best way to get bigger budgets is as simple as making better work. And the hard thing is that, in my experience, the best way to do that is for you to eat the deficit between the budget you have and the budget you want. So an example of that would be if you look at, say, the Grey Havens Far Kingdom music video that I shot a while ago now. It was a few years ago. There wasn't a lot of money to make that video, but I knew what I wanted to do, and so I busted my butt to pull a bunch of connections so we could get a really cool location and do art direction on it and get lights and everything, and I didn't make any money on that project. But that project looked good enough that it led to other projects where people were like, hey, we want one of those, and I was able to say, well, this is what we need to do that, and this is what that costs. Another example of that would be if you go back and look at the first change of command video that Chris Fenner and I did on the Movi. I'm not exactly sure which year it was. It probably would have been 2014 if I had to guess. That video was not a big budget video. Mass Maritime had been doing all event videos and just recap videos of the day, whether that's graduation, change of command, sea term departure, all these different things we were doing. And the usual budget was about $2,000 per video, to be honest. And so I was like, I really think we could make these more interesting and at least make them more compelling than just a montage over music. So I asked them for a slight budget increase so I could fly someone in. And then I just paid for everything we needed to make that video what it was. And we did interviews, we lit them, and we did that at the same time as we were shooting the Falmouth Fish Market commercial, which was a similar project, and that I made no money on either of those projects. But as I finished those and handed them off, they were things that people were like, wow, this is significantly better than anything we've seen that you've done so far. How do we get more like that? And I said, well, this one was kind of me facilitating that, but in order to do this sustainably, we need a little more money. And so the next video that we did, that was an event video with interviews and everything for Mass Maritime, was, I believe, an $8,000 budget. So that immediately gave us access to more funds to actually do what we want to do. Now, there was a measurable impact there. It wasn't just me doing the same thing and making 4 times as much money. I was flying in other DPs. We were actually getting more gear. We were shooting more days because we were doing a whole day of interviews. There's more editing and everything that went into that. So that was good because those were days and time that otherwise I would have been doing nothing, and so that was time that I was happy to be editing instead and making a little extra money on it. So the other thing that you can do is figure out how to simplify what you're doing on your workflow or however you're working, and be working for similar budgets but doing more projects and spending less time on them. So maybe you currently spend a lot of time doing titles for all your videos, and you just are wasting time on this because you could be shooting and it's more valuable for you to be shooting. And so that's part of why I have pretty much outsourced all my titles to a few people, but primarily Jonathan Reynolds is my motion graphics artist, because I'm just not going to bother spending time with that, because that's time that I could be doing something else. Similarly, all my audio mixing gets done by Joel Russo. I don't bother messing with audio. So if I get a project, I'm going to shoot it, I'm going to cut it and grade it, and then everything else is going to get taken care of by someone else so that I can move on to the next project, which allows us to do more projects more quickly. It's faster for clients and allows us to turn stuff that isn't huge budgets, but isn't a big time commitment on my part. The way that you're going to get a client interested in spending money on something like this is by showing them why it's valuable. And unfortunately, that it looks pretty is not necessarily the most valuable thing to someone. But if you can connect it looking pretty to something that has a tangible value to them, then that's something they're going to be interested in. An example of that would be the video that I'm working on next week for a brewery. This brewery was looking to raise some money, and so we decided to set up kind of a creative crowdfunding campaign for them, and the goal is for them to get $350,000 out of it. Now, if we do an awesome video that gets them $350,000, that's $350,000 they wouldn't have had otherwise, which means that video is worth a lot to them. And part of what we did in order to help make that interesting to them is we actually proposed a deal where we get commission on the crowdfunding. So that way we're motivated to do the best job we can do, instead of just, cutting an easy video and running, and they're motivated to have us do something awesome. So that's another interesting method. There's no real standard in something like this, especially when you're working direct to clients. But if you can do something that's measurable, like an athletic promo that the goal is that this is going to get you 10 more good athletes this year, then, what's the dollar value of those athletes? Then this is the kind of video that you should be doing. Or if it's a commercial for X, food retail place, how many more customers or diners do you have to get for this to be worth X amount of money? And let's figure out how to make that happen. Because too many people are willing to throw, $2,000 at anything just to have it, but it doesn't serve a purpose, and so it's not that valuable. And I think that's the place a lot of people get stuck in. But when you come alongside a business and figure out, hey, here's an opportunity that we could help you make a bunch of money using what we do, but it's going to cost X amount of money, then they're not really worrying so much about how do we make that cost less? They're more worried about, that's going to get us this, then we want that. And so that's another really big thing that you have to take in consideration, is just how are we providing value to people? If you're just shooting pretty pictures, then I don't think you're really ever going to get that much money to just make pretty pictures in the world we live in now, because it's easy to make pretty pictures. But making things that make people money are very valuable. And that's why big companies put big budgets behind things. Because if, Ford does a commercial that sells whatever, $30,000 cars even, then that was $300,000 gross in sales, and they're obviously trying to sell a whole lot more than 10 cars. So if we're trying to sell 1,000 cars, then we can justify putting $100,000, $200,000 behind this, because it's going to pay for itself. But if you're going to a bride and saying, hey, I want $20,000 to make you the greatest wedding video ever, they're like, well, that's not really worth it, because I don't need that great a wedding video ever. Or if you go to your average, small local business that is probably barely surviving, and you go, hey, we can make you the greatest commercial ever, and we're going to have an Alexa and a whole crew, and it's going to cost you $50,000, they're like, we don't even make $50,000. Like, that's not helpful to us. So you have to kind of target the right client, figure out how you're going to fit their needs and do something that's actually valuable to them, and then present that to them in a way that they're seeing the value that you're providing more so than the nuts and bolts of the actual production. That then you're not worried about line items. That's why I don't really ever do line items with people, because we're just trying to accomplish a goal, whether that goal is to raise $350,000, get X number of athletes or whatever. Then it's my job to handle that money and make that happen. And it's not their job to worry about that. So then I don't have to say, well, I'm going to show up with this camera and this lighting and this number of crew for these days. Most of my jobs, the clients don't know what we're showing up with until we get there. It could be just me, it could be 10 people, it could be an Alexa, it could be my C100. And the budgets aren't tied to that at all. I've done big budget projects with my C100. I've done free projects with the Alexa Mini. It all just depends on using the right tool for the right job. But I keep that ball in my court by just assessing what the value is to them, and then the value of the end product is all that matters. The mechanics aren't something that they should have to get themselves into. So that's a whole bunch of rambling thoughts about budgets and stuff, and money in the business of this is obviously something that's really involved, and I'm going to kind of elaborate on some more things in this world next week in the vlog. But thank you so much for watching. I'd love to hear any questions you have, so comment here, find me on Facebook, and message me, and I'll add you to this group that we have, and you can ask questions there, share your work, get feedback. You can follow me on Instagram at Evan Boursier. You can follow me on Twitter at eBoursier. And if you go to eBoursier.com, you can see the blog where I've been posting some behind-the-scenes stuff from recent projects of mine, as well as links to all my social media and links to this YouTube channel. So please subscribe, and thanks so much for watching.
Push.